You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the corruption of Adam Air. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's thrilling tale.
Adam Air, which was incorporated as PT Adam Sky Connection Airlines, was a privately owned company based at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, West Jakarta in Indonesia. It operated scheduled domestic services to over 20 cities and international services to Penang and Singapore. And although it was sometimes referred to as a low-cost carrier, it marketed itself as an airline straddle between low-cost and traditional carriers, which offered both an on-board meal service and low fares. Prior to the crash of Adam Air flights 574, which crashed into the Makassar Strait near western Indonesia on the 1st of January in 2007, killing all 102 passengers, it had been the fastest growing low-cost carrier in Indonesia. When Adam Air was asked what caused the fatal crash of Flight 574, the chief executive officer of the company said that it was down to a freak weather problem and that everything was okay when the plane took off. However, at that time, it was already suggested that because of corruption within the company itself, the real cause of the crash may never be known. Many pilots joined Adam Air when it was founded in 2002. However, most of them quit years later due to concerns over the airline's safety record. Prior to Adam Air's demise, the company was in serious financial trouble, with the company's owner, a Sandra Ang, having allegedly embezzled the company's money, with the financial losses from this embezzlement reportedly amounting to approximately $210 million. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in again and listening to this corruption-swilling episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man with a very dark and disturbed sense of humour who lets strangeness dominate his life because being ordinary can be quite dull at times. But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Tuesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the unexplained or true crime banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and serial killers, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of this episode's subject that I can reply to, a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Or if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the unscrupulousness surrounding the corruption of Adam Air. And this week's necessary disclaimer: this story is a tale that involves details of aircraft collisions, crashes and corruption, so may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise, as usual, if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, whilst narrating my shows, I sometimes get lost in my own thoughts. Although, fortunately, I don't get lost for too long, as I find I am amongst unfamiliar territory. Anyway, let's get back to this week's story. So, first, exactly who or what was Adam Air? Well, according to Wikipedia, Adam Air was founded in 2002 by the Indonesian businessman Agung Laksono and the Speaker of Indonesia's House of Representatives, Sandra Ang. Sandra Ang herself is from an Indonesian Chinese family which owned the airline, with it being named after her 26-year-old son, Adam Schuurman, who was later designated the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO, of the company. Operations of the airline began on the 19th of December in 2002 with two Boeing 737-400 aircraft leased from the Irish-American Commercial Aviation Financial and Leasing Company called GE Commercial Aviation Services, with its first flight being taken within Indonesia from Jakarta to Medan and Denpasar. Adam Air had been involved in various talks with multiple private investors over the years. These included discussions about the sale of a 20% stake to Qantas Airways Limited and a takeover bid from the private equity fund Texas Pacific Group. However, after the crash of Flight 547 in January 2007, the interest from the foreign investment soon faded. I will go into more details regarding the Flight 547 crash later in this podcast. The Indonesian investment firm PT Baki Investama Tbk was still interested in acquiring Adam Air. The company already owned a stake in PT Indonesia Air Transport Tbk, with the president Harry Jaja saying that at the time, and I quote, "Given our experience with IAT," meaning the Indonesian Air Transport, of course, "which has an excellent safety record, we are certain that we will be able to create positive synergies and improve the way Adam Air is run." So, as a consequence, Adam Air sold a 50% stake of itself to PT Baki Investama. The aviation consultant Jerry Sajatman did originally state that Adam Air was successful because of its fresh image, in which he was referring to the bright colours of both the airline's insignia and uniforms. However, on a later date, during the August of 2006, he posted on airliners.net that the airline poorly maintained its airliners, saying that any Adam Air aircraft is at risk of becoming, and I quote, "a smoking hole in the ground." And following another airline accident, namely the crash of Adam Air Flight 292 in Batam in the March of 2008, the aforementioned PT Baki Investama TBK, together with the business consortium Bright Star Perkasa, which together owned a 50% share in Adam Air, announced that they would bail their investment and sell their shares back to the carrier's founders. As with the aforementioned Flight 547 crash, I will go into more details regarding the Flight 292 incident later in this podcast. Adam Air's safety record, and to be fair, they weren't alone to face this type of criticism amongst the Indonesian airline industry, had been heavily criticised. Many pilots from Adam Air at the time had reported on many occasions the repeated and deliberate breaches of international safety regulations and the airline's attitude towards them, with aircraft being flown in non-airworthy conditions for months at a time. Adam Air pilots said that these incidents included:
Number 1.
Requests to sign documentation to allow an aircraft to fly whilst not having 1. The authority to do so, and 2. Knowing that the plane was not airworthy.
Number 2.
Flying one plane with a damaged door handle and another aircraft with a damaged window for months at a time.
Number 3.
Swapping aircraft parts between planes so as to avoid mandatory replacement deadlines.
Number 4.
Using spare parts from other aircraft in an attempt to keep the planes in the air.
And last but by no means least, number 5.
Ignoring the pilot's request to abort the takeoff even though the planes were obviously unsafe. And just to add a little terror into what appears to be the already made horror, according to the Associated Press, one pilot from Adam Air is reported as saying that, and I quote, "Every time we flew, you had to fight with ground staff and the management about all the regulations you had to violate." They also said that if the airline's pilots confronted their seniors, they were either grounded or had their pay docked. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at the aircraft accidents that happened with the Adam Air passenger airplanes.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could, and has, taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
On the 11th of February in 2006, Adam Air Flight 782, a Boeing 737-329, whilst just 20 minutes into a flight from Jakarta to Makassar in Indonesia, the plane had lost all of its navigational and communication systems during the flight. The aircraft was subsequently flown into a radar black spot and ended up being lost for several hours. And eventually it had to make an emergency landing at Tambalaka Airport in Sumba, which was a different island, 481 kilometres away to be precise, from their intended destination. It appeared that, going by later reports, Adam Air had broken multiple safety regulations, with one very severe regulation in which they removed the aircraft before it was due for inspection by the aviation authorities. The pilot in the Flight 782 incident was consequently fired. Fast forward to just over a year, and on the 1st of January in 2007, air traffic controllers lost contact with Adam Air Flight 574, a Boeing 737-400, which was en route from Surabaya to Manado in Indonesia. It would be 10 days later, on the 10th of January, when the aircraft's tail stabiliser was found 300 metres, or 980 feet, offshore along the Makassar Strait near Poliwali in Sulawesi. And after a short time, the flight recorders and other suspected debris from the aircraft were located. However, the parts were not officially recovered due to a dispute between Adam Air and the Indonesian government over who would foot the bill regarding the recovery costs that would be involved. However, after Adam Air agreed to pay just 7 days of searching, both of the flight recorders were retrieved. The official crash report had concluded that the Inertial Reference System, or the IRS for short, had failed, and that this failure, which would not by itself have brought down the plane, caused the pilots to become preoccupied while trying to repair it. And after changing the inertial reference system from navigate mode to altitude mode, the pilots then failed to manually fly the aircraft while the computer system recalibrated, which in itself is a procedure that only takes about 30 seconds. This then caused the plane to fail in maintaining a straight and level flight during the computer system recalibration, which in turn caused the autopilot to completely disengage and cease compensating for the plane's tendency to roll to the right, which again in turn caused the nose of the plane to dip. And in the pilot's attempt to correct the pitch of the aircraft before levelling the wings, the pilot then sent the aircraft into an unrecoverable downward spiral, which led the plane to suffer a massive structural failure as it descended at nearly the speed of sound towards the terrain. There were 96 passengers and crew on Flight 574 who lost all their lives. The investigation into the Flight 574 incident disclosed that the aircraft, along with the faulty inertial reference system and several other mechanisms, had been the subject of more than 40 pilot complaints or write-ups from Adam Air pilots in the months prior to the crash. Adam Air Flight 172, a Boeing 737-300, was a scheduled domestic passenger flight from Soekarno-Hatta International Airport to Juanda Airport in Surabaya, with both airports located in Indonesia. On the 21st of February in 2007, the Boeing 737-300 that was operating the flight at the time had to make a hard landing at Surabaya and consequently suffered cracking of the fuselage in the middle of the passenger section of the aircraft. The landing in this instance was particularly hard, so much so that the baggage from the cabin lockers was forcibly ejected into the cabin space. And once landed, the tail section of the aircraft was bent downwards compared to the rest of the craft, or the plane. I mean, let's be honest, if that isn't a sign that something is wrong with the aircraft, I don't know what is. But anyway, I digress. Immediately after the incident, all other flights headed for the airport were then diverted, and all of Adam Air's fleet of Boeing 737-300s was grounded in the interim for obvious safety inspections. Adam Air then decided to repaint the damaged aircraft, covering the original orange livery paint with a plain white exterior, as apparently at the time of the accident anyway, this was legally permissible as long as no evidence was destroyed. I don't know, somehow this doesn't give me a lot of confidence being a passenger in the aircraft, but maybe that's just me. But again, I digress. Also, in the immediate aftermath, and rather unsurprisingly, a large number of passengers cancelled their flights, with Adam Air stating that they had, and I quote,
lost faith
absolutely,
in the airline.
Absolutely. With all the cancellations being refunded in full. All 6 of Adam Air's remaining 737s were immediately grounded, although 5 of them were back in regular service later that year. The Flight 172 incident did cause further concerns regarding the safety of flights that were operated by Adam Air, which had already received much criticism after the aforementioned crash of Flight 574 on the 1st of January in 2007, with the Indonesian government announcing plans immediately after the recent accident to ban jets over 10 years of age for any commercial purpose. The age limit had previously been 35 years or 70,000 landings. And, as far as I can tell, the Indonesian Ministry of Transport is still discussing the problem of ageing aircraft, with them proposing to ban the import of any commercial passenger aircraft over 10 years old, and furthermore ban the operation of any aircraft over 30 years old. A little bit of trivia here. Whilst doing some research, I discovered that the world's global fleet of passenger aircraft, according to the International Air Transport Association, is older now than ever before. The organisation, which represents airlines globally, says that as of the end of 2024, the average aircraft is 14 years and 10 months old. There now, doesn't that make you feel safe? As well as looking at retiring ageing aircraft, the Indonesian Ministry of Transport is also intending to introduce a new system of ranking airlines according to their safety record, with a level 1 ranking meaning the airline has no serious issues, a level 2 ranking meaning the airline must fix problems, and a level 3 rating forcing the airline to be shut down. On the 10th of March in 2008, Adam Air Flight 292, a Boeing 737-400 that was flying from Jakarta to Batam, skidded 75 metres off the end of the runway while landing at Hang Nadam International Airport located in Batam. Luckily, all the 171 passengers and 6 crew members survived. However, 2 of the passengers were treated for shock. The Boeing 737-400 itself sustained damage to one wing and was therefore ultimately written off by its lessor. On a quick interesting side note here, a lessor is a participant of the lease who takes possession of the property and provides it as a leasing subject to the lessee for temporary possession. For example, in a leasehold estate, the landlord is the lessor and the tenant is the lessee. The lessor may be the owner of the property or an agent authorised on the owner's behalf. The Adam Air Flight 292 incident did illustrate at the time that none of its crew were trained correctly on evacuation procedures, with particular notice given during the evacuation of this aircraft that no slides were deployed to allow the passengers safely off the plane. It was this Flight 292 accident that contributed to Adam Air's eventual demise, because just 8 days later, the formal the formal revocation of its AOC was given. My apologies. An AOC is in aviation commonly refers to an air operating certificate, which is a crucial certification granted by the aviation authorities that permits an airline or operator to conduct commercial air transport services, with the certificate ensuring that the operator meets specific safety and operational standards required for a safe airline. After this second short break, in part 3 we will look at Adam Air's corruption and demise.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk. Or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
On the 16th of March in 2007, the Indonesian government announced the shutdown of an unspecified Indonesian air carrier, and although no specific details were immediately released, it was revealed that the airline in question had had a string of recent accidents, making Adam Air a more than likely candidate. One official representative from Adam Air, speaking anonymously as he was not permitted to speak to the press, said that they were, and I quote, prepared for the worst. And so it was announced a week later, on the 22nd of March, that Adam Air was indeed one of the 7 airlines that would lose their licences within 3 months unless they could improve their safety standards. But the company got a break when it was reported that on the 28th of June in that same year of 2007, Adam Air would escape shutdown and had upgraded its safety rating. However, the company, as reported by the local news, had reduced many of its flights by decreasing its frequencies to only several departures, both from Jakarta and the Surabaya airports, which are both located in Indonesia. Approximately a year later, on the 16th of March in 2008, Adam Air was given 21 days' notice by the Indonesian government to decide whether to close down after more safety concerns prompted an investment group to unload its 50% stake in the airline. And the following day, the president of Adam Air, Adam Suherman, announced that more than half of the fleet had been seized after the airline defaulted on its payments. He also said, and I quote, "Out of 22 planes, we now only have 10 because 12 of them have been declared in default. The other 10 have been declared in default as well, but I'm trying to work out a way to restructure the payments." However, just a mere 2 days later, on the 18th of March in 2008, after another aircraft carrying 78 passengers crashed at Hang Nadiem International Airport in Batam, in which a Boeing 737 skidded off the runway while landing, the Indonesian government suspended Adam Air's operator certificate and gave them just 3 months, again to show safety improvements. But on the 18th of June that same year, just 3 months later, the Indonesian government revoked Adam Air's operator certificate for good and the airline ceased operations. A Hong Kong-based English-language news outlet named Asia Times said it had spoken to some well-placed local sources, and although they requested anonymity, they claimed that the Adam Air founder, Agong Laksono, did not invest any of his own money into the airline, and that he instead used money available to him through his official government position as the Speaker of Indonesia's House of Representatives. And furthermore, the local sources also claimed that the position that Agong Laksono was in gave him the unfair advantage of receiving heavily regulated licences and airport landing rights. And, personally, I have to agree with the sources, because as it turns out, this Agong Laksono, including his entire family, have had no previous experience in the aviation industry. One of the other things that seemed to open up this box of fibs, as it were, with the airline, was Adam Air's original advertising campaign, which contained statements that were considered by many to be direct lies, telling passengers to, and I quote,
"Take to the skies with the new Boeing 737-400s.
Even though it's 2 Boeings that were on lease from GE Capital Aviation Services were in fact both used planes and over 15 years old. And not only that, but at the time Adam Air was founded back in 2002, the 737 aircraft families, meaning the Boeing 737s and the 737 Classics that made up Adam Air's fleet at the time, had been out of production for several years and had been long replaced by the 737 Next Generation family. After the aforementioned incident on the 11th of February in 2006, in which Adam Air Flight 782 landed at Tambaloka Airport in Sumba, which was a completely different island and approximately 500 kilometres away from their intended destination, the pilots of the aircraft blamed a malfunctioning navigational system. Immediately after the incident, the Directorate General of Air Communications, or the DGAC for short, sent instructions to Adam Air to repair the faulty system. The airline was then required to conduct a total of 13 tests, flight with the DGAC inspectors on board before the aircraft could return to commercial service. However, instead, Adam Air left behind the team from the National Transportation Safety Committee, who was supposed to be transported to the site of the Boeing aircraft, and sent only their own company engineers. And according to Adam Air, they repaired the fault, and the aircraft was immediately returned to service without any inspection, with the Director General of Air Transportation, Iksan Tatang, saying that the incident was, and I quote, "a serious violation," promising a full investigation into the matter. However, no sign of the investigation's finding exist on public record, and it is unclear if any investigation into the incident took place at all, with most critics saying that Adam Air used its political connections to sidestep aviation authorities. When Adam Air was asked by Tempo magazine what caused the aforementioned fatal crash of Adam Air Flights 574 in the January of 2007, before Adam Air agreed 9 months later to help find the wreckage, the Chief Executive Officer, Adam Suherman, said, and I quote, "It was a weather problem. Everything was okay when the plane took off, except for the X factor. We are not God." However, at that point, it was already suggested by the Asia Times that because of all the corruption at Adam Air, the real cause of the crash of Flight 574 might never be known. On the 21st of February in 2007, it was reported that 13 Adam Air employees, as well as one employee from airport operator PT Angkasa Pura whilst working at the Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, had been arrested for fraudulent data manipulation. And because of this report, a computer from the check-in desk, as well as various passenger tickets and lists, were seized. The scheme itself involved manipulating passenger data in order to show passengers as leaving the country. This meant that they were automatically charged a duty of 30,000 rupiah each, when, in reality, they owed nothing. This money was then being split between the 14 staff members. Nice work if you can get it. Prior to its demise, Adam Air was in serious financial trouble, with the company's owner, Sandra Ang, having been allegedly embezzling the company's money. The financial losses from the embezzlement reportedly amounted to 2.1 trillion rupees, which is approximately 210 million US dollars. And on the 12th of August in 2008, the Indonesian police named the company owner, Sandra Ang, as a suspect for money embezzlement, and was later arrested and banned from leaving the country. By the end of 2008, almost every single one of Adam Air's aircraft was returned to its lessor, with only one of its Boeing 737-200s remaining. However, even that one was eventually scrapped just 3 years later in the capital city of Bandung, in the West Java province of Indonesia.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 141, we are going to be looking at the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male was a study conducted between 1932 and 1972 by the United States Public Health Service and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on a group of nearly 400 African American men with syphilis. The purpose of the study was to observe the effects of the disease when untreated, and although by the end of the study medical advancements meant it was entirely treatable, the men were not informed of the nature of the experiment, and consequently more than 100 of them died.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names and places, though, again, was all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. Now, we never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you know of any other interesting or intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will see what I can do. I will also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other of the podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.